I am on mute. I'm extremely sorry. Yeah. Good morning and welcome everybody for our webinar on industry performance for the month of August. The numbers for the month of August seem to be quite encouraging as the non-COVID portfolio also seems to be bouncing back to normalcy. The trends that we would be discussing in the next 30 minutes would definitely be supporting what the views that I'm expressing just now. From this month onwards, in our webinar, we have started a special section on opinions that matter, wherein we have invited industry experts to discuss or give their opinion on topics of interest, of mutual interest for the industry. The topic that we have taken for this month is the cardio-diabeto industry. So cardio-diabeto segment is one segment which has not picked up to that extent. So we would like to understand from the industry experts what is the reason for that not picking up of the cardio-diabeto segment and when do we see that segment to revive. Besides the cardio-diabetes segment, we are also covering certain topics which have shaped the dynamics of the IPM sales industry in the light of COVID, especially the teleconsultation, the online pharmacies. And we will be looking at understanding of these experts on how these areas are going to evolve in the long term as well as short term. So without spending much time on the introduction, I will move directly to the presentation. For bandwidth purpose, I will be stopping my video and I will be moving to the presentation. Yeah. The topics that we will be covering today are, as usual, I look at on the road to normalcy, then IPM performance trends, how the IPM is realigning to the seasonal trends now, the growth drivers, the COVID drugs gradually losing their sheen. We also look at top performers, the top corporates, how the composition of COVID, non-COVID is now gradually shifting to the non-COVID portfolio, the top brands, certain key takeaways that we take away from this presentation, and last but not the least, our most interesting section, opinions that matter. I will take you briefly through this section and then we start the discussion. Coming to on the road to normalcy, this is the chart which I always keep on displaying at the beginning of my session. So this chart actually gives us a confidence that things are going back to normal. So the peak of wave 1, where we saw almost 97,000 cases, peak of wave 2, where we saw close to 4 lakh cases. And if you look this data as of, I think this is as of 3rd September, the number of cases are around 45,000, which is almost 50% of the peak of wave 1 and almost 10% of the peak of wave 2. The good part is this number has plateaued, or the plateau is being seen for the last 3 months, June, July, August, September, almost more than 3 months now. It may take a very long time for this number to come down from 45,000 to 1,000. But the comforting part is it has stayed at 45,000 for a very long time. If wave 3 doesn't occur, it's good. But even if wave 3 occurs, probably the severity may not be that strong because as of today, more than 50% of our population has been vaccinated with at least one dose of the vaccine. Coming to the next slide, we talk about the IPM performance trends, the realignment, the seasonal trends, the growth drivers, the COVID drugs are gradually losing their sheen. Now in this chart, what we have done is we have taken the IPM trend line right from the month of January. So if you look from January onwards till date, the IPM follows a steady trend line. And this value actually keeps on, hovering around this linear trend line. It's only in this first lockdown and second lockdown or, wave 1, wave 2, that we have seen an aberration. This is something which we had seen last time as well. But then we try to see what is the commonality in the August trend in the pre-COVID period and in this month of August. So if I were to look at how does the market behave in the month of August around the linear trend line, we have seen that there is usually an uptick above the linear trend line in the month of August. If you see in the month of August, our IPM value trend has gone above the linear trend in August 16, in August 17, in August 18, in August 19, and even today in August 21. The only time this IPM value trend stayed below the trend line was in August 20, which was an exceptional year, the COVID year. But otherwise, this phenomena gives me a confidence or gives us a confidence that somewhere there is normalcy being seen. Probably the disease patterns are also normalizing today. Then we look at the growth drivers. This is something which we always keep on plotting the growth drivers over a period of time. In the so when we talk about the growth drivers, it's a proper mix of volume driven growth, price driven growth, and new product driven growth. So when we talk about volume driven growth, it talks about the growth which the existing products are giving. Price driven growth is the growth which we get due to increase in prices. And new product driven growth is the growth which the new introductions are giving us. So if you see, typically what we have seen is otherwise in pre-COVID times, there was a good balance of all the three growth drivers. It is in this COVID year that volumes have disrupted this pattern. In wave one, because of availability problems, sudden lockdown, volumes had brought the growth down. In fact, this negative growth was majorly because of volumes. And in the second wave, when all of us were well prepared for the high demand that may come in the market, these volumes again went up and again disrupted the normal trend. But if you look in the last 3 months, the growth drivers are well balanced. There is a good balance between the three parameters, the volume, the price, as well as new introductions. So this again gives me a comfort, or it gives us a comfort that yes, somewhere the industry is normalizing. The growth today may be seen on the slightly higher side. Now this slightly higher side growth is because one is there is a correction of the negative growth that had happened in the previous times, in the previous year, as well as the normalization of the growth trend or the trend lines that the market is seeing. Then what we have done is we have looked at the same growth trend for the month for the different therapy areas. So how does the growth trend look across the different therapy areas? It is a few segments like the anti-infectives, the respiratory, the pain segment, where volumes are still driving the growth. This may indicate that in these therapy areas, there are certain components which continue to have a higher demand in the market. So probably they are COVID-related components. We will, as we move ahead, we will see which are those components which are driving the growth of the market. Then what we have done is in this chart, we have actually arranged the therapy areas in descending order of value. When we have arranged them in descending order of value, we see the anti-infectives, cardiac, gastro, anti-diabetic segments are the top segments. Then we have looked at the MAT growth, which obviously may be on a higher side because it was COVID times. But in the month of August, as the wave 2 is subsiding, probably the demand for certain products may be coming down. Still, we see certain therapy areas like anti-infectives, gastro, respiratory, pain, gynacs, opthal, their growth seems to be on a higher side. Now, is this an influence of COVID-related drugs? So what we did is we removed the COVID-related drugs, and then we looked at the growth of these therapy segments without COVID drugs. So if you see growth of these therapy segments without COVID drugs, still these therapy segments seem to be showing very good and robust growth. This is indicating that there is a normalization of the disease pattern somewhere around the month of June, July, August, as well as the correction of the COVID dip that was seen in the last year. That is the reason why without COVID drugs also, a majority of therapy areas have shown a very good positive growth trend. Now what we have done is we have now bifurcated this IPM into COVID drugs and non-COVID drugs and looked at their trend lines. So if you see a major disruption, which was seen in both COVID as well as non-COVID, was at the time of lockdown 1, because all of us were caught off guard. But then at the time of second wave, major disruption was not seen in the non-COVID drugs. It was this COVID drugs where the demand itself went up suddenly, just like for drugs such as heparin, certain hormones, etc., which disrupted the market. But more or less, at the time of peak of wave 2, the COVID drugs were more or less in line with their normal linear trend pattern. So it's their demand of these drugs now. Actually, it was falling in line with the normal trend, but probably, we were focusing more on COVID drugs, and COVID drugs are driving the market and not looking at the trend line of the non-COVID drugs. Now the monthly growth trends for COVID and non-COVID portfolio. We keep on discussing this slide every month. So for the people who are joining for the first time, the drugs which fall in the COVID portfolio are the drugs which have direct or indirect role to play in COVID treatment, or managing the complications or prophylactic purpose. So anti-infectives like favipiravir, remdesivir probably for actual treatment, but other anti-infectives for managing opportunity infections. Gastros have picked up significantly. Anticoagulants and other high-end anticoagulants to manage the COVID complications of clotting during hospitalization and post-hospitalization also for some patients. Insulins, where patients, because of excessive use of corticosteroids, are losing their glucose control, levels shooting up, injectable insulins given as acute therapy. Then we have antidepressants sales rising because of the probably lack of social activity, social life, work from home, loss of near and dear ones. Respiratory cough, cold, antitussives especially went up. As you know, the slightest symptoms you get of cough and cold, you run to the doctor now. And nutritionals, obviously, because of their immunomodulator, immunobooster properties, their demand would continue to remain high for a little longer time, till the time the threat of wave 3 still remains. Net, if you see, the IPM with COVID influence contributes to 37% of the IPM, and IPM without COVID influence contributes to around 63%. Now, if you look in terms of growth, at MAT level, IPM with COVID influence has grown by 28% and without COVID influence by 7%. So when we talk about IPM without COVID influence, it means that these drugs really do not have any role to play in treatment of COVID or management of opportunity infections or prophylactic purpose. The good part is at a month level, the non-COVID portfolio has shown a robust growth of 13%. So why do I talk about it? As you know, though it is just 13%, why do I feel that it is very comforting? For this, I actually compare the growth for the last 3 months, June, July, August. At a MAT level, if you see, the contribution of COVID and non-COVID was 60-40, which has now stabilized to 63-37. What I did is I actually tried to do this proportion for a little longer backward period. I tried to do it for a period from August 2016. So the ratio actually is more or less the same. It is not that the ratio is going to further go down to 80-20 or something. It's going to remain 37-63 for the rest of the time. So what we need to look at, how does the growth look over a period of time? Now, MAT is actually a accumulative thing of the last 12 months. So let me just focus on the month growth. So if you look for the month of June, the growth was 3% for the drugs without COVID influence, which moved to 7% and now to 12.8%. So though the 12.8% number may look lesser, but as compared to where we were in the month of June, it's almost 4 times of the growth that we had seen in the month of June. Whereas if you look at the drugs with COVID influence, it has moved from 35% to 27% and somewhere now stabilized to 27%. This number, in fact, is also giving me an indication of normalization of the seasonal disease patterns. Then we also tried to look at the growth drivers of COVID and non-COVID drugs separately. At a MAT level, if you see the volume-driven growth of the COVID drugs is relatively on a higher side, obviously because the demand was higher. Whereas non-COVID drugs, the volume growth was hardly anything. But as we move for the month of August, we see that the COVID drugs, for the COVID drugs, the volume may stay high. But for the non-COVID drugs, the volume-driven growth has now started to be seen on a positive side, which is another very good sign indicating that the existing drugs have started, or the existing drugs are there in demand. So again, telling me that, okay, now probably the pickup will happen in a conventional way. Now, what I did is this further study I did for the COVID drug growth drivers for the month of August. This all the therapy areas. Again, I broke these therapy areas into the COVID part as well as the non-COVID part. So if I want to look at the COVID part, majority of the therapy areas, I am seeing a good balance, except probably in anti-infectives, where hospital anti-infectives are showing a little higher sales. Now, this volume today is not majorly favipiravir or remdesivir. It is more hospital-driven anti-infectives. Respiratory, probably it's a good mix of cough and cold and inhalers. Pain and analgesics portfolio, if you see now, the growth drivers are high. Volume-driven growth drivers are very high for the COVID-related part as well as the non-COVID-related part. In fact, pain as a therapy was one therapy which had shown a significant degrowth somewhere in the month of August 20. And now this high growth that we are seeing across the COVID and non-COVID section indirectly are first is there is a demand which has recovered and there is a correction of the negative dip. If you look at the other non-COVID drugs such as anti-infectives, gastro, nutritionals, the non-COVID related part, if you see almost everywhere, we are seeing a good balance of volume growth, price growth, and new product growth. So somewhere it's not just IPM overall, but majority of the sections within the IPM are going back to normal. Now, one therapy which or two therapies which are slightly exceptions over here would be cardiac therapy and the anti-diabetic therapy. These are the two therapies which right now have not picked up. I will not be discussing the details why, because we are covering it in our opinions that matter section of this webinar. Then we look at the top performers, wherein we look at the corporates, the brands. Among the top corporates, now top 20 companies, they contribute to around 70% of the IPM. So this 17.7% growth is actually an indicator of the top 20 companies doing well in the market. So if you see for the month of August, the top 20 companies have done really well. At least the majority of the top 20 companies have shown a good double-digit growth. But is this double-digit growth a part of COVID portfolio, or the non-COVID portfolio has done as well? So we segregated the growth of these companies without COVID portfolio. So if you remove the COVID portfolio from these companies, again, for a majority of these companies, the growth without COVID portfolio also seems to be very good and very aggressive. This is also indicating that a good number of top 20 companies, which are major contributors to the IPM, have managed to do well across both the COVID as well as non-COVID portfolios. Same picture if I were to look at the next 20 companies, which are contributing to around 15% of the IPM, I see a similar picture where overall for the month of August, the growth is robust. But at the same time, if I were to look at growth without COVID drugs, majority of the next 20 companies also continue to show a good growth. Then we look at the ranking of the brands. If you see, because of the high value that FabiFlu has today, it is obviously at a number one position. Zincovid, because of the demand of the nutritionals still, was very high in the last few months. It is at a number two position. But if I were to look at the growth or, the ranking as of for the month of August, these brands have now come down in terms of ranking. It is very obvious that as the wave 2 subsides, the demand for the drugs for direct treatment of COVID will obviously come down. And that's the reason why FabiFlu has come down in rank. There are some other drugs among the top 20 which are not there for direct treatment, but which are more of hospital related anti-infectives. So a good number of hospital related anti-infectives like Monosef, Aug'21, Clavam, they have also shown a good double-digit growth for the month. Then we also have Thyronorm, Dolo, Udiliv from the different sectors which are not anti-infectives. Even they have managed in pain section, gastro section, they have also managed to show a good robust double-digit growth. I would not categorically say that it has to be attributed completely to the COVID phenomena, but yes, a part of it may be attributed to the COVID phenomena. Then coming to the next 20 drugs, if you see again over here, we are seeing drugs from pain, nutritionals and respiratory segment. We have Orofer, we have Calpol, then we have Cinerist. All these drugs still continue to have a robust double-digit growth for the month of August. So essentially, it's not that all the brands have come down. But then there are certain brands which have revived. Certain brands which had gone down during the COVID times, now they are having their normal trend lines. Whereas certain brands where the opportunities still exist, they are managing to leverage that opportunity till the time the COVID fear is there in the people's minds. This was to summarize this session. Apprehensions related to COVID seem to be dying down rapidly. IPM showing normalcy in seasonal disease trends now. While COVID drugs continue to show high growth, non-COVID drugs also tend to show normalcy in growth. Certain categories like cardio-diabetes segment are yet to pick up momentum. Many of the top companies for the month of August 21 have shown a robust growth not only in their COVID portfolio, but in the non-COVID portfolio as well. So certain brands that leverage the COVID opportunity well seem to be slowing down in demand rapidly. There are others in the anti-infectives, pain, nutritionals, and gastro segment which are still going strong. So this was a summary, but then there are some important questions which still remain in our mind. And this is exactly what we will be covering in the opinions that matter section. Why is the cardio-diabetes sector still slow in picking up? And when do we expect it to pick up? Post-lockdown, did faster initiation of field work give any added advantage to the companies, or did newer ways to reach the doctors in helping filling the gaps? What is the future of teleconsultations? Will it still continue to be popular once the doctors start normal practice? As many activities were majorly online during pandemic, so did buying medicines. How do you see online pharmacies evolving in the Indian market? In all the above scenarios, do we see any major behavioral shift in the metro, non-metro patients? So for this, we have three industry experts who will be discussing. It is not a live discussion, but we have had a discussion with them over the weekend, and we will be sharing the discussion with you. So over to Richa, who has worked towards this entire panel discussion and worked on this entire session. So over to you, Richa. I will be stopping sharing my screen now.
Hello and good morning to everyone joining us today. This is the first edition to our segment Opinions That Matter. In this edition, we have invited some of the top industry executives who have spent many years working in sales and marketing. Each one of them believes in keeping a tab on the pulse of the market and their customers by engaging in regular fieldwork. Today, they share with us the opinions and the possible future for cardio and anti-diabetic segment in the Indian pharma industry. On our panel today, we have Mr. Bijender Singh, who is the Senior Vice President and Cluster Head at Lupin Limited. We have Ms. Seema Samant, AVP at Sun Pharmaceuticals Limited, and Mr. Vinay Singh, Senior Vice President and Cluster Head at Zydus Healthcare Limited. My first question is to Mr. Bijender Singh. Sir, we see in the current month of June, July, and even August, most of the therapies have picked up except cardiology and diabetes. What could be the probable reasons for a slower growth being registered for both these therapies?
Richard, there are 2-3 reasons because of that the growth is slower. One is the less number of patients, especially for follow-up in case of cardiology and diabetes. So because it is a progressive disease, diabetes as well as cardiology. So always whenever a patient comes after some time, there is addition in the drugs. So that is not happening. So low patient footfall is one of the reasons. Secondly, whatever new diagnosis is happening in case of diabetes or cardiology, it is because of the COVID treatment, the post-COVID diagnosis of diabetes is steroid induced, which is very transient in nature, and after 2 to 3 months with the treatment, patient goes back to normal. So newer diagnosis of the frank diabetes patients are less. And there are a lot of CVD patients. If you just recall the number of cases in COVID in India and the death, which is almost amounts to 3%. So, and the most common comorbidity was cardiology and diabetes ailment. So, a good number of patients has died. So, follow-up patients which was supposed to come in the treatment, they have not come because of the death. So, that is number is also reduced. And in normal case, if you just see, the 10 to 15% drop in the patient by virtue of change in the doctor, change in the therapy, or many other reasons, or change in the city. And the slow economy is also, we can correlate with our GDP growth. If you just look at the GDP growth, which is pre-COVID was 24.4%, and which has come back to now 20.1%, which is almost 80% of the pre-COVID level we have reached. So I think we should be very, very optimistic, and going forward, things are going to be changed. And the advantage with COVID is that a lot of health consciousness has increased in the patients. So once the things coming to normal, patients are going to come, which will have a positive impact in the industry.
My next question is to Mr. Vinay Singh. So last year there was a complete lockdown and no one was allowed to move outside. However, once the unlock started rolling out, we saw some pharmaceutical companies resumed work while others refrained from it. My question is, do you feel that the companies who went back to the field early post the unlock 1 was announced by the government had the benefit of early sales in chronic product portfolio?
In my view, those companies who took opportunity to meet the doctors early post unlock 1 under the pretext of giving them safety kits, sanitizers, etc., must have helped them largely as they got more recognition and appreciation from the doctors for putting that extra effort to meet doctors' need during pandemic. In addition, because of panic buying, product availability at retail level became a critical factor. Companies who started early fieldwork could capitalize on it as they had well defined priority of improving their product availability by reaching out to more number of chemists with their clear focus on POB. Well, in short, these companies aligned with the well-known saying, early bird catches the fly. Well, to answer your question, yes, companies who started early post lockdown had clear advantage in terms of recognition in doctor's clinic and improving the product availability at retail level.
Seema ma'am, I believe many pharmaceutical companies were trying different avenues to reach out to HCPs during the lockdown. The same also holds true about doctors and patients trying to reach out to each other. We saw platforms like Practo advertising very aggressively during the lockdown. Well, we also have new entrants like Mfine entering the market now. What is your opinion on teleconsultation and its future in our country?
Healthcare sector witnessed many changes during COVID pandemic, and one of the most disruptive change is the exponential growth of telemedicine. One of the reports suggests that online consultations they increased by 500% during COVID period. Now this usage increased because both patients as well as doctors they wanted a very safe way for accessing and delivering healthcare. Many pharma companies they also facilitated this trend because many pharma companies they collaborated with multiple telehealth platforms as well as they developed their own telehealth platforms so that they can effectively serve doctors during this period. Now the big question remains whether this trend is going to continue. My sense is telemedicine is going to stabilize. The growth which we are witnessing now is going to go down. However, the total number of online consultations are going to be significantly higher as compared to the online consultations that were happening before COVID period. Now this growth is mainly contributed because of the comfort that both doctors as well as patients develop during this period. My expectation is that telemedicine is not going to remain isolated. It's going to get integrated during the day-to-day practice of the doctor. The doctor's practice is going to be more phygital, where the first few consultations would be physical consultations and follow-up consultations, especially for outstation patients would be more digital consultations. Now, there are many challenges, and if these challenges are addressed, they will ensure it will ensure that there will be a sustainable growth of this sector. Now, look at this challenge that there is a less awareness about digital payments in tier 2, tier 3 cities. Even the bandwidth issue, the internet issues, they overall compromise the visit experience of doctors and patients. So even though there are so many challenges, but the technology is evolving, and I feel that yes, telemedicine is here to stay and is likely to grow beyond pandemic period.
Vijayendra sir, I have one more question for you. In the recent times, we have seen a surge in the online pharmacies. Big names like Amazon have started a pilot in Bangalore, while Tata has invested in 1mg. With more online pharmacies establishing business in the country, do you see a shift in the purchase of chronic therapies from the traditional brick and mortar establishments to online pharmacies?
I think this is one big change which has happened during the COVID and post-COVID. The online pharmacy definitely adding business, and this is changing the business model. Because of the online, the advantage, medicines are reaching to the doorstep of the patient. And for the companies or industry, the advantage, we are getting a lot of transparency in the data and the distribution, and as well as planning objectives. So that is the one advantage because of the chain pharmacy or e-pharmacy, which you are referring for. And there are more than 50 pharmacy currently working in India, e-pharmacy, and their growth is 50% over a period of time because of the COVID. And so this model is changing. Definitely, because of the COVID, people have experienced they have increased confidence in the technology, and because of increase in technology, they are using this, and it is helping them patient to have the access to the medicine and the access to the medicine at their doorstep. And probably this is the game changer. And going forward, this is going to be the model in the coming times.
Vinay sir, my last question of the day is to you. Life is back to normal for quite a considerable percentage of population in the country today. However, we still have restrictions on travel, and patients from smaller towns are not able to come to tier 1 cities for consultation. Do you see a difference in metro, non-metro patient footfall and new patient detection in chronic therapies like diabetes and cardiology?
Based on my interaction with doctors and field executives, I have reasons to believe that metros are impacted more than non metros. The patient footfall in metros was severely impacted due to lack of transportation facilities and general fear of pandemic. Well, the fact is, metro patient footfall is still less than usual, as many patients still prefer to do online consultation versus non metro, where people prefer going to clinics. In addition, new patient detection has considerably slowed down. Most of the patients seen during teleconsultation by doctors are follow up patients. There is reduction in routine surgeries, health checkup, and in clinic camps conducted by companies has significantly dropped. Hence, incidental health elements may have reduced. Having said that, I believe moving forward, we will see a better traction as patient footfall in metros and non metros will steadily get back to normal as COVID cases are relatively lesser.
Thank you, sir. This adds a lot of value. I also take this opportunity to thank Brijendra sir and Seema ma'am for joining our panel today and sharing their thoughts with us. Thank you so much. I would also like to thank our industry partners for spending their valuable time with us. Your feedback and suggestions on this initiative are welcome. With this, we end our Industry Insights webinar for IPM performance in the month of August 21. Thank you. Have a great day ahead.